This
faces.
conference will now be recorded.
This conference will now be recorded. I was about to say, if I'm not actually seeing your faces, I am at least seeing your names, and it makes me really happy to see the names of so many alums and faculty members and faculty emerita and students and brand new faculty. Welcome, Jacinda Townsend. So happy to have you here. Oh, fantastic. Well, I still see people popping in on a pretty regular basis here, so I'll just talk for a couple of minutes longer before we get going. And we have completed our first full day of residency today. We've had some wonderful, yep, exactly, Sam. We've had some wonderful sessions, including a fantastic one on adaptation by Larry Brunner and Kira Oblensky. So we're underway. The ship is sailing out of the port, and it's pretty exciting. The reading, the way that we do these faculty readings is actually fairly casual. If we were live and in person with each other at the Egan Leadership Center on campus at Spalding, the faculty members would just trot up the stairs to the podium and introduce themselves briefly and jump right into their readings. And so we're replicating that today. So the order of faculty readings today, I'll just read that out, and then we will just go ahead and go. And Leslie, are you, how do you feel about going first? I can reshuffle you in the order if you'd like to. You're good to go first? Great, okay. So our order is going to be Leslie, followed by Greg Pape if the power comes back on in Frankfurt. Apparently there's a power outage in Frankfurt. So if Greg is able to join us, he will join us, and so he might be going out of order. So assuming that Greg is not here, then Jacinda, you are going to be after Leslie. And then Roy, you're after Jacinda, and Erin, you're after Roy, and Sam, you are anchoring, I think that's called, in some aspects. So at any rate, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much. And I'm very pleased to introduce our first reader, Leslie Daniels. And as I said, after this, we're just rolling. So all you faculty, just jump in when it's your turn. So thank you. Over to Leslie.
Thank you, Katy. Before I read, I wanted to say thank you to Kathleen for her rigorous and inspired leadership in this program, and to Linnell for her scholarship and commitment to our students, to Karen for her mad skills, pragmatism, and unrelenting kindness, to dear Katy, to Jason, to Ellen, thank you for making it work so well for all of us. And thank you to my extraordinary colleagues, you inspire me. To my wonderful students, you challenge me, you engage me, expand my understanding of what it means to be a writer. I value this community. I value what we are doing here, working together to strengthen our individual voices. What we do here is essential for writers, and it is radical and impactful in the world at large. We are listening deeply to each other, and we are celebrating our differences. I'm reading a short piece from my nearly complete memoir and essays called This Won't Bring Her Back. And this piece is called Tiny Man Dream. And I want to say before I read it, I feel very kindly towards therapists. So some of my family are therapists. Therapists are getting us through this pandemic. My first thought on waking up was, thank goodness I'm not in therapy. Or maybe it was, too bad I'm not in therapy because there's no one to tell this dream to. It's not that I don't want insight, but a therapist would seize on a dream like this as if it was a ticket to the meaning party. The dream had a very small man dressed in a maroon button-down shirt and blue pants, worn leather belt, perhaps glasses, fair hair, professing his love for me. His clothing, as I think about it, doesn't signify anything strongly. Here's a man who is neat and who is not stylish. He had a nice enough body if you consider someone who is 8 inches tall to have a physique. He dressed the way a nice man dresses on a Saturday, not to impress, but for neatness. And should anything happen to these clothes while he was, say, cleaning out the garage, it wouldn't matter much. Unless those were his best clothes, in which case he must have been somewhat poor or at least clueless. You could buy those clothes at any Goodwill store in any county, any day of the year. If you wanted clothes that would not get you a table at a top restaurant, clothes that would not get you remembered anywhere, that maroon shirt and those blue pants, not navy, but a wronger blue, would do the trick. The hair, too, fair, but not ginger, neatly combed to the side in a style that worked in Kansas in the 50s and may still, was a kind of don't look at me, or at least don't let your eyes linger style. And yet he was boldly, madly in love with me. Not exactly madly, because someone of such careful appearance would not let himself go wild, but sincerely, deeply desirous of me. I listened to the tiny man's protestations of love and desire, and I feel that I am, in this dream anyway, worthy of love and desire. I consider his size. I consider fulfilling his desire. How would that go? I consider cramming him inside me. Could he even survive that? Feet first? What about the glasses? At this point, the therapist would have come to their conclusion, which would have missed the important aspect of how kind I am being in my dream, how considerate of the tiny man's welfare. Would he smother in my vagina? The therapist, who by now would have been listening to my crap for at least 6 months, would head down the path of, well, at least she's willing to fuck somebody, or maybe the other path of her ambivalence towards intimacy has given her a manageable target of a mildly handsome man with a penis the size of a pin, someone she can dominate. Thank you, I should say to them, for their insights. And here, take my money. But I'm worried about the tiny man's welfare. Plus, I would never put a fully clothed person inside my vagina, nor do I have any desire to take off those tiny clothes. But here's the part that I would not want to have to explain to my therapist. I take seriously his desire for me. His desire is something I could fulfill. Why I feel I should fulfill it is something I will never understand, awake or asleep. Maybe, sadly, this is who I am, a person deeply influenced by what others want from her, even people in her dreams, people barely taller than a new pencil. At this point, the therapist would ask me, "What is the tiny man saying to you?" But I'm unable to summon up his words, although I note that his voice doesn't have the indignity of squeakiness commensurate with his size. Nor can I imagine what he could be saying to convince me, a full-size woman, to countenance his suit. So I don't, which is the freedom of not being in therapy. Only now, I don't know what is the thing that could be said that would convince me that I am loved. I decide whether from my own perverse interest or from true kindness to fulfill his desire. Without undressing him, I rub the tip of my forefinger along the fly of his blue pants, very lightly, back and forth, in a way that may satisfy and yet won't hurt his tiny self. He doesn't stop talking, but his tiny face flushes madly. In my dream, I don't worry about him messing his blue pants, nor do I think about my own pleasure. To be honest, and therapists make a big deal about honesty, maybe I think about both of those things. He's liable to come in those tiny little pants, and no way will it ever be my turn. Yet in my dream, like in my waking life, I do this thing because it is a generous solution to a ridiculous situation. Thank you.
Okay, I think I am next, right? Can you guys hear me?
You are. Yes.
And I think now you can see me. So it'll be really hard to follow, Leslie. That was really amazing. I just want to shout out, first of all, to my advisees, Brent Hoffner, Kayla Etheridge, and Liz McGill, and shout out to everyone. I am just so excited to be on the faculty and sharing in all the work. So, you know, a lot of what we do as fiction writers is channel all our nasty emotions into something completely different than what caused them. And that's what I did during the pandemic. So I actually, this is from a novel called James Loves Ruth, and it is, I finished it actually during quarantine, believe it or not. So it's kind of all about the now, and you'll recognize some of these situations. So the only sort of setup I'll give you is that James and Ruth are getting a divorce and their house just burned down. COVID-19 had the hospital looking like a war front. When she'd arrived in the middle of the night trying to find Annie and James, Ruth had found triage tents outdoors to accept the emergency room overflow, and every person, doctor, nurse, patient, visitor, with their own surgical mask. Whatever Annie had going on right now wasn't at all serious. It wouldn't kill her. It wouldn't wreck Ruth's finances. Still, the accident had tapped Ruth on the shoulder and notified her that the danger was never over, that death would be hovering in a corner, grinning and whispering, so long as there was life. What I wouldn't give for a crystal ball, she heard people say offhandedly. But a broadcast of the future was the last thing she wanted. What would she see swimming there in the Aleph but the end of all things? The end of her marriage, the end of Annie's childhood, the end of all their lives, the polar bear-starved end of the planet. The Great Recession that NPR said was coming now that the world had shuttered all its business. The bread lines, the people eating grass near Chernobyl. There it all would be, whirling around the contents of the glass, and if she saw it all, how it would all end, she'd make a few last gasps for oxygen and collapse in the corner of the hospital room, curl into a ball on the cold enamel floor and cry and cry. Annie's left arm, where she pressed into the metal door of the house and pushed her way out of the fire, was bandaged from shoulder to wrist. She was knocked out with Demerol, and Ruth went to sit beside her and stroke the arm that wasn't burned, marveling at how smooth it was, still just a child's hand, no matter how many times Annie used it to text the word shit to her friends on Snapchat. There sat a tray of food that had been wheeled in by a nurse, with a bowl of tomato soup and a piece of desiccated yellow cornbread such as Annie would never have eaten. When Annie woke, Ruth planned to feed her the soup, spoon it into her mouth as if she were a little bird, because Annie was left-handed, but it was her left arm she now had to keep stationary and elevated against the fluid buildup. It was just, thank God, a first-degree burn. In a couple of weeks, the doctor told them, after the blisters had sunk back into lymph and the arm's coloring returned to some semblance of olive, it would seem as though the burn never happened. Still, James had disappeared a few minutes after Annie fell asleep. perhaps because he could no longer sit across Annie's bed and look Ruth in the eye. The house fire that had almost killed their daughter had happened in his, no longer hers house, on his, now completely his, weekend custody watch. "Oh, dear God, Ruth, I'm so sorry," he'd said in a rush when she'd made it up to Annie's room. Ruth had never heard him cry before, and she went queasy at the sound of his ugliness. He sounded like a goose, one up for slaughter. It was such ugly crying, with his eyelids turned mauve and snot glistening in the caves of his nostrils, that she almost told him none of it was his fault. It wasn't like he was an arsonist, she almost said. The fire was an authentic accident, such as could happen to any parent. She knew he loved Annie. Of course he did. She knew he was a competent adult. But she wouldn't say that out loud. She would not tell him it was okay, or that he was okay, or that anything was going to be all right. This was the bargain of getting divorced. Forgiveness was no longer an allowable feeling. They had lawyers now, and temporary payment splitting orders, and document production. There'd be no profit in mercy. A nurse came to say that one of them was going to have to leave. Hospital policy was changing by the minute, the nurse said, and even minor children were going to be allowed only one visitor at a time. James gave Ruth a sad face that she saw as an offering. The new power differential, his having almost killed Annie, decreased any psychic debt she owed him. He went to the tiny, bleach-tinted bathroom in Annie's room. The ping of his urine rang against the low water level in the bowl, and Ruth matched it to the note Annie held for 2 measures in her current orchestra solo, C sharp. He flushed, and she heard him blow his nose. He was still crying. He came out of the bathroom with the heels of his hands pressed to his eyes. When at last he broke his sobs, she put the steel in her voice to ask how the fire had happened. He leveled his eyes to hers, then rose and went to the window, where he put his forehead against the glass. "They don't know yet," he said. Ruth imagined the window pressing coolly against his forehead, but the sun was screaming as it sank, setting the edges of his silhouette ablaze in goldenrod. It lit his green sweater, making the patch on his shoulder completely white. "The marshal has to come out when the structure is stable," he said. "Do a full investigation." "The structure?" Ruth asked. "You mean our house?" James started crying again in soft honks, and it took several stops and starts of his voice for him to tell her. "It's gone. The crew's there now, chopping into the walls to stop any leftover embers. They're ripping up carpet," he said, his voice going high in his Adam's apple to stanch a new break of weeping. Ruth's cute brick house, where she'd stepped through the door the day after closing into her perfectly empty living room and decided she'd become even less of old Ruth than she already was. "What do you mean it's gone?" she asked him. James hid his eyes behind his hand. Ruth's 2-story house with its bay window, where she'd sat and lain in ever more lies, tiny eggs of false history that hatched and took on life. Ruth's 2-story house with its bay window, where she'd sat and laid more lies. From James, more weeping. Ruth couldn't believe how unattractive he was as a crier, how she'd ever fucked and then married this quaking man. Ruth's house with its kitchen door frame, with her daughter's annual height marked in pencil. The door frame, her daughter's benchmarks, the point at which Annie's height had surpassed Russell's, and Ruth felt old Ruth leave her as if cleansed by wind. All that was gone. All that resurfaced Ruth, all that bathroom tile, all that finished basement where she'd planted lies and let them grow. All of it gone. Ruth couldn't bear to hear James cry any harder, so she dropped her line of questioning. Outside, through the room's one small window, she saw a driving rain. It had been falling for hours. James smelled like a chimney sweep, and his eyes were as wild as she'd ever seen them. She accepted silence, his blessed silence. But he came to stand behind her, and in this cache of physical proximity made an exciting retelling of his brush with death, the language of disaster spooling out rapid fire like the clicks of a photograph carousel. "That big of a fire is shiny," he said, "like if you touched it, your hand would come back wet." Annie was awake, but only in the vaguest way when he started talking. As he continued, Ruth saw her eyelids flicker, and then she lost herself again to sleep, felled under the weight of the Demerol. James was watching Annie too, she guessed over her shoulder, and he'd moved close enough behind her that she could smell the soot in his air. The Red Cross had given him a change of clothes, but he had yet to shower. I left the door open when I ran out, he said, but that was the dumbest thing. Because? Fire sucks oxygen through an open door, just like a vacuum cleaner. He stopped. Oh God, Ruth, you knew that. Oh God, I'm so sorry. She'd actually forgotten after all these years of not telling the lie, and she stiffened her neck, remembering that it was what James thought killed her parents that night at the Beverly Hills Supper Club. An unsuspecting employee had opened the door to the inner room, where fire was still smoldering in the roof, and let it out into the rest of the complex. It's okay, she said. It was so long ago. It felt good to forgive something she didn't need to forgive. Whenever real life ran across the largest of her lies, she was stunned at the way it still felt so good to be generous. James continued, telling her how the fire had fed itself through the door and kicked into higher gear once they were outside. He and Annie had watched High Tongue's torch and blanket the living room ceiling, and they'd heard glass tinkling from the rear of the house, where, they assumed, the upstairs window acquiesced to the party of flames. I couldn't believe it was burning down, he said, and then the roof fell in. The house just sucked its roof right down its own throat. He was a good enough storyteller that Ruth felt bedraggled, as though she'd been there with him, dodging the danger. She turned around to face him, angled her head to look up and make one slow, pronounced bat of her eyelashes that she hoped came across as profound nastiness. You'll never have Annie on the weekend again, she knew the balance of a divorce required her to say. You almost killed my child. I'll petition the court for sole custody. Don't think I want. It wasn't what she felt, though, so she hurled a worse javelin. Some mistakes, she heard herself say, you have to die in order to fix. James stopped crying then. He stopped crying and he stared at her. She saw his jaw clench. She saw him take a swallow of what could only have been air. And hey, she continued, after all that, I don't see you spooning food carefully down a burn victim's throat. Why don't you make yourself useful? Press the call button over there and ask the nurse for more. But the nurse was already there in a cherry blue mask with little bears doing gymnastic tumbles on its fabric. I'm so sorry, she said, but one of you has to go. Ruth followed James to the door and watched him walk past the nurse's station, take his left, and disappear behind the wall of the elevator bank. Ruth sprawled on the hospital couch with one of her legs bent over its arm in a way that made her feel like she was growing out of the blue pleather, like the sofa was some sort of Ruth planter. On the television, Andy Bashir gave his daily COVID update. There were photos behind him, school officials in Metcalfe County doling out school lunches. Look at the smiles, he said. Look at the sense of purpose. That's how we'll all get through this. By being good people. Thank you.
Roy, it looks like you're muted here.
I've got it.
There you go.
Terrific. Hello, I'm Roy Hoffman, and it is my pleasure to toast you from Fairhope, Alabama, near Mobile Bay. To those of you who've created and run our program, to the colleagues of mine who teach in the program, to the students, and to everyone who dreams and turns those dreams into language, it is a great joy and honor to be with you. During quarantine, one of the tasks that I have pursued is to write some personal essays nurtured by what else but travel. After all, we haven't been able to go anywhere, so it's been time to go back through the photo albums and the notebooks of places that we have been, and to find some stories that may be delightful or moving or meaningful in some way. And this piece, which is new, is called The Willow of Memory, the Great Synagogue of Budapest. It's a long way from my humble congregation, Sha'ara Shemayim, Spring Hill Avenue Temple in Mobile, Alabama, to the Great Synagogue of Budapest, the largest in Europe. With its Moorish-influenced design of onion domes, arches, and towers, opened in 1859, the synagogue was built to seat 3,000 congregants in its heyday, with room for another 2,000 to stand. Its affiliation being Neolog, a conservative Judaism common to Hungary. There's a gallery upstairs for women, the pews downstairs for men, a tradition over the generations outmoded in the sanctuary. Heightened by opulent chandeliers and stately pulpit, the Holy Ark rising to a dome with the Star of David, its grandeur is like that of Budapest itself, and its darkness too. When my wife, Nancy, and I arrived in Budapest in late October 2019, it was dusk. And from our hotel on the Pest side of the river, we walked by the statue of the city's famous son, Franz Liszt, and across the chain bridge to monumental Gellert Hill on the Buda side, heralding the city's magnificent vista. It would be enough as a tourist to take in the beauty of the Danube, eat goulash and drink Hungarian white wine, visit the stunning Parliament building with its Austro-Hungarian history. But then there were those shoes. The shoes on the Danube was an artwork created in 2005 of 60 pairs of shoes cast in iron along the Danube walk. Among them were scattered memorial candles, and as we strolled by them, joined by tourists from around the world, we said a prayer of remembrance for the victims they represented. The 20,000 Hungarian Jews killed by the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross Party, shot to death and thrown into the river. To these would be added hundreds of thousands more wiped out by Hitler. We knew the basics of this history. Even the guidebooks recounted it. But something about seeing those shoes, which ones fit my feet, you can't help but ask, changes your perception of the Blue Danube. It was our drizzly second day in the city that we visited the old Jewish quarter, about a 30-minute walk from our hotel down a large boulevard with big fashion stores, and turned into a warren of streets that, like the Danube shoes, reverberated of the past. We ambled by two exquisite small synagogues, a few kosher restaurants, shops selling mezuzahs and menorahs, hipster food trucks and used clothing stores, and ruin bars, drinking establishments built into the ruins of old buildings. Who knows what Jewish enterprises were once here? This was the heart of the old ghetto. The reality staggers the imagination of what had transpired along these blocks and throughout the country. As the website of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, tells us, in May 1944, the deportation of Hungary's Jews to Auschwitz began. In just 8 weeks, some 424,000 Jews were deported. By the end of the Holocaust, some 565,000 Hungarian Jews had been murdered. Yet, the glorious Great Synagogue still rises along Dahani Street. Home for worship to Budapest's much smaller Jewish community today, it is a historical masterpiece, a destination for visitors from all over. As we got tickets and entered, we felt lifted up by its 19th century mystique, an architectural model for Central Synagogue in New York. Though not Jewish, Franz Liszt played its pipe organ at its inauguration 160 years ago. Theodor Herzl, the founder of the Zionist movement, was born next door. Inside the sanctuary, tours were conducted in a dozen languages, And I felt, as I often do in historic synagogues, from Amsterdam to Shanghai, both a feeling of powerful connection to an ancient and global people and the sadness of so much, so many lost. Around me, I could hear the vanished men and women bending over their prayer books, reciting in unison. More than the passage of time had taken them, they had been eradicated. Or had they? On the pulpit, behind the drawn curtain of the ark, was the Torah. I could not see it, but I felt it there, with other scrolls rescued from synagogues destroyed in the Holocaust. I knew its readings, its prayers, its Hebrew would be as familiar to me as it is at home. The Jews who'd worshiped here heard these words too. We walked into a garden in the synagogue complex, and along the shrubs were markers holding the names of some who cruelly lost their lives when this sacred land was part of what had become the Jewish ghetto. Each marker represented the lives of countless others. The garden gave way to a memorial park named for Raoul Wallenberg, the Swedish diplomat who tried to save Hungarian Jews. In the middle of the park was a weeping willow tree, like one outside of my family's house in Mobile, Alabama, when I was growing up. This willow was fashioned from metal, in artwork by Hungarian sculptor Imre Varga. The Emmanuel tree was named for Hungarian Emanuel Schwartz, commissioned by his son, Bernard Schwartz, born in New York, Hollywood name Tony Curtis. A plaque said, in honor of Jamie Lee Curtis. On each leaf was the name of a Jew who'd been murdered in the camps. I walked into a cluster of the leaves and I reached out to one. On its shiny metal was inscribed, Hoffman, Jeno, Jeno. The J is silent. Against my palm, the leaf lay against the pulse of my wrist. Hoffman is not a rare name, but it was mine. On Raoul Wallenberg Plaza in Washington, D.C., in the database of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum are the names of millions of victims of the Holocaust. I am looking for just one. There is no photo of him, but there is scant biographical information. The clues begin to make a man. Jeno Hoffman, 1905. Address, the town of Hust. Residence, 1 Paxirta Street. I researched this place. Hust is a village of mountainous terrain in what is now the Ukraine, but in the 1940s, it was part of Hungary. At the time, there were 6,000 Jews there in its population of 21,000, with 6 synagogues. Photographs show it as a place of modest houses with white stucco facades, red roofs, and a medieval castle looming on a nearby precipice. I cannot find the street name Paxirta, but in Hungarian, I find out it means skylark. Hust is named for its stream, Hustica, meaning kerchief. Pretty names, like Danube, from the Roman river god Danubius. Deceptive names in this story. In the 1940s, Jeno Hoffman would have been in his 30s. Jews, not an agrarian people, owning land was often prohibited, were merchants, shopkeepers. I imagine him closing up his shop. Let's say he was a milliner, a maker of ladies' hats, arriving home in time for the Sabbath meal before going with his young family to synagogue. The chanting fills him with reverence. In his daily work, he loves to sing. The authorities come to his store. He will now work in the brickyard, they tell him. I see him as my height, slender, with a thick black beard. He will defy them. I am Jeno Hoffman, he says. The trains are arriving every week, chugging and groaning and creaking into the Hust station. Workers from the brickyard at the heart of the ghetto now are taken by gunpoint to the train. Jeno was part of this Hust deportation. says the Holocaust Museum's database. I find a resource called Death Trains in 1944. The Nazis kept impeccable records. And it shows the time schedules of 147 trains that ferried Jews from Hungarian villages like Hust to the city of Kassa, a hub for transport to their final destination. On May 24th, 1944, a train originated at Hust with 3,244 Jews aboard, on to Kassa, on to Poland. On June 2nd, another train. On June 6th, another. June 6th, 1944, D-Day. The Allied troops landing in Normandy. That date would never be forgotten. But Yeno did not land on the beaches of Normandy. He was in a cattle car on his way to Auschwitz. On a map of Yeno's region, I see across the border in Romania the name of another village, Piatra Neamt, also in the mountains by a stream. In 1879, another Hoffman was born there, Morris Hoffman, my grandfather. As a youth, escaping the brutal anti-Semitism of Romania, he fled, crossing the mountains, perhaps passing through Hust, then across Europe, making his way to Hamburg, becoming a stowaway on a ship bound for America. I try to find a descendant of Yeno to tell him about Morris Hoffman. And there he is, Yeno Hoffman, on Facebook. He seems to own or work in a cafe in Hungary. There are no pictures of him, but of tables, plates of food. I write him and tell him my story, how I found his forebear's name on the memorial willow. He never messages me back. Morris Hoffman did not dwell long in New York. He took a bride, another Romanian Jewish immigrant, Mary. They ended up felicitously in a seaport town on America's Gulf Coast, where my father was born, where I was born. Morris Hoffman and Yeno Hoffman, to my knowledge, were not related, but they became so that day at the Great Synagogue of Budapest. My weeping willow tree, robust in the Alabama sun, now holds both their names. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Hi.
yes, we can.
Thank you, Roy. That was wonderful. And thank you, Leslie and Jacinda as well. It's fantastic to be here on the opening full day of fall residency. Thank you so much to everyone who tirelessly organizes our lives together, both online and eventually again in real space. I'm going to read today from my manuscript in progress, which is it's a hybrid of cultural criticism and family memoir. So it's a collection of essays. This one is from a braided essay, but I'm only going to follow one strand. And what you need to know about it is that my mother was a teenage runaway, and she is still alive. Once I got it in my head to go visit the girl skeleton at the Smithsonian, I couldn't shake it. Her name is New Jersey Skeleton 1972, but everyone calls her Sandy. Forever 15, presented by the police to the museum's anthropology department. I read about her in a book published the year I was born about the epidemic of teen runaways in the late 1960s through early 70s. My mother is the only grown-up teen runaway I've ever met, but she was apparently a drop in a wave. New Jersey Skeleton 1972 is the phantom girl I was taught to fear. The girl with the trusting smile, the girl with the grabbed wrist, the girl trapped in the car, the girl kept in the room, the girl dumped in a ditch. Sandy had been spotted hitchhiking near the Jersey Shore in the spring of 1971. 6 months later, 2 hunters found her body in a gravel pit on the side of US 30 near Egg Harbor, with nothing but a hotel key in the pocket of her denim flared trousers. There was a man, isn't there always? He was cleared by the cops, deemed a good enough guy, though he was also old enough to book himself and the girl into a motel and buy her the bell-bottoms she had on when she died. The author, Christine Chapman, repeats what the man told the police, that she had said her name was Sandy, but he didn't believe her, that she was on her way to Atlantic City to get a summer job with no bag, no nothing. He took care of her, bought her clothes and fed her, got them that motel room and spent the night, left her there and went off to work. And on day 2, he came back in the evening and she was gone. He seemed kind and she needed a place to stay, Chapman writes, as if Sandy's bones could corroborate this account. After waiting for her at the motel for 2 days, where he did not call the police, he checked out and, this is a quote, returned to his routine and forgot about Sandy until New Jersey police confronted him with the fact of her death. For 6 months, he told no one. Nobody tied a missing 15-year-old to the bones found in a roadside gravel pit with a motel key in the pocket of the jeans she didn't leave home in. He seemed kind. 6 months after that, in 1972, the cops gave her body to the Smithsonian Institute, a young and recent specimen, prized, a rarity for the anthropology department, where they read her bones to see what story she would tell. Teenagers are an abstraction, the Smithsonian anthropologist tells the writer. Until you know one, as I know Sandy, they are not very real to you. Did she know Sandy? What could she know of her? Like Bruce Springsteen's Sandy, the South Jersey girl he pleads with in his song 4th of July, Asbury Park, she is a creation, a composite, every girl who took off away from or towards something and ended up in a drawer attached forever to some guy's story that makes him out to be the hero, the one who tried to save her and lost something of himself in the process. Imagine being left with only that. Could Madame Marie read this Sandy's fortune better than the cops did? What would she make of that man in the motel room? Of Sandy's parents who never claimed her? Of the Smithsonian, that temple of knowledge? I email David Rosenthal, Collection Manager, Archaeology and Ethnology, Department of Anthropology, to ask him about Sandy. I want to come see her. I can't quite articulate why in a way that doesn't make me sound like a weirdo with a true crime podcast. Maybe to reassure her that someone out here remembers her, even if it's someone she's never met, who wasn't even alive when she died. Maybe to confront the end I grew up fearing the most. Dr. Rosenthal can't help me, but he can refer me to Biological Anthropology Collections Manager Dave Hunt, who also can't help me, but refers me to Dr. Doug Ubelacher, whom Dr. Hunt says was there when Sandy was admitted to the collection. Dr. Ubelacher has no recollection of this specimen, as he calls her, and he refers me back to Dr. Hunt. The emails are polite but dizzying. How does a missing girl go missing again, decades later? The first time it was a tragedy. Losing her again is a farce. At my persistent request, Dr. Hunt takes a closer look at the records and discovers that Sandy has been deaccessioned from the collection. These are restricted files, so I will have to go to the National Anthropological Archives to look at this file and see what documentation is in this file, he tells me. If you want access to the file, you will have to get written permission on letterhead from the Atlantic County Medical Examiner's office. When I look for a contact there, I find yet another roadblock. The Atlantic County Medical Examiner's office has vanished, along with, presumably, its letterhead, the casualty of a bureaucratic merger. Once again, Sandy lies in limbo, unclaimed. I try to deaccession her from this story, to put her out of my mind, but I can't. Eventually, I find the right form to submit to the Consolidated New Jersey Southern Regional Medical Examiner's office, and I mail my request for a letter of permission to view Sandy's files in the National Anthropological Archive, which I acknowledge, to whom it may concern, is a little odd. A medico-legal death investigator emails me back. She can't release any information about Sandy to me because the case of her death, while cold, remains open. She gives me what she can, a missing persons number to look up in the national database, and an offer to have a staff anthropologist run DNA or dental records of any missing person I might suspect could be Sandy against her records. Stay safe, she signs off. I plug Sandy's number into the database, and there she is, in more detail than I thought possible. She was small, 5'3", 118 pounds. She dyed her hair, which was found in shades of blonde, brown, and red brown. Body discovered in woods off of Jim Leeds Road near milepost number 42 of the Garden State Parkway in Galloway Township, New Jersey. All parts recovered, not recognizable, near or complete skeleton. Her description reads, she wore a ribbed blue cotton or synthetic shirt, white, blue, and orange striped canvas or cotton trousers of the hip hugger variety, underwear and a white bra, and brown leather sandals, all found on her body. On her wrist, she wore a wide brown leather band inlaid with small brass grommets, a delicate lady's West clock watch embedded in it, a perfect contradiction of girlish and rocker style. And there's her face, or at least several artistic renderings of it, no two looking alike. A couple of scowling, crude police sketch composites from 1971 and 72, one 3D computer model in which she looks a bit like Mariel Hemingway did at 17. One girl can be so many girls all at once. There's one more recent speculative portrait, home-trimmed bangs framing her alert eyes, her mouth almost ready to smile at this man's jokes. I am attached to Sandy, but I am just the latest person to fail her. I have no leads for the medico-legal death investigator's cold case, no DNA for the anthropologist to cross-reference against hers. I have nothing to give this girl. I want someone to know, though. The clothing store clerk, the motel manager, the diner waitress, the man who bought her those striped hip huggers and then forgot about her until the police came calling. That girl doesn't just vanish as if she never existed. Nobody looked for her then. It was the least I could do for her now. A girl heads to the beach to trust her secrets to the tides, or she runs away from its switchblade lovers and carnival lights. Same mythical woods, different direction. Sandy doesn't owe me her story, but that doesn't stop me from wishing to hear it. As Sandy slipped a motel key into her pocket, Bruce Springsteen wandered Asbury Park with Madame Marie's Mysteries of the Future in his. Marie Costello, the boardwalk fortune teller, lived to be 93 years old. Sandy didn't see another set of fireworks over Little Eden. She named herself Sandy, left her given name behind. She couldn't have known that her chosen name would become synonymous with a young man's conflicted love for a home he could leave anytime he wanted, wander the earth relatively unharmed, and be reasonably sure he would be welcomed back, as he is always welcomed back, when he alone decided it was time. In high school, when I was just a year older than Sandy, I memorized all 206 bones in the human body. I learned how to name a skeleton part by part, from parietal to distal phalanx. It helps to carve the whole down into parts. Start with a small, manageable story. One hand has 27 bones split into 3 types, the carpals, the metacarpals, and my favorite to whisper into my practice worksheet, the slippery phalanges. My practice skeleton was a body scribbled over, a story constantly revised, worn thin by eraser, a constellation of arrows surrounding each carpal by which she could be lured, dragged, pinned. Trapezium, scaphoid, lunate, capitate, rough jewels clustered like lakewater mussels, like gravel on a highway shoulder. That was then. The answers were clear. Now, only tests I can't pass. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wow. Okay. Talk about tough act to follow. But hello, everyone. I'm Sam Zalutsky. I live in New York City. I'm very honored and happy to be here and to be reading with such amazing faculty. Special shout out to Jacinda, new faculty member. Welcome. I can't wait to meet you in person. And hello to everyone out there. Thank you to the administration for putting this incredible residency together. It's wonderful to be able to connect with you and all of you in whatever way in these challenging times. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'm going to read from a new screenplay called Conversion. It's a horror story about gay conversion therapy based on a short story by the fiction writer Robert Levy. Conversion therapy is still legal in about 30 states in the United States and only outlawed in about 8 countries or so around the world. So it's a fascinating and terrible thing that has I've kind of been diving into lately. But anyway, Conversion, the screenplay, is set in suburban Atlanta, and it's about Jared, who is the star of his high school football team. And here we go. Exterior, Jared's suburban backyard day. Jared's mom, Casey, 40s, still dressing like the most popular girl in high school, sips her rosé and looks up to see Jared, 17, her restless son, looking at her from his bedroom window. Casey, hey baby, don't you want to come say hi to your mama? Jared, in a sec. Jared slams the window. She sighs as Jason, 40s, her husband, former jock going to seed, steps out of the house. Casey, how many times? That friggin' window. I mean, come on. Jason, he's got more important things on his mind, babe, like another state championship. Rah, rah, Excelsior. He picks her up and twirls her around. She giggles. Casey, put me down, you big brute. But Jason doesn't. Casey, what do you want for dinner, babe? And don't say steak. 3 nights in a row is too much. Jason, well, I was going to say chicken, but now I gotta say steak. Jared emerges from the house. Casey, babe, you want something to eat first? Jared, no, I'm good. Jason, you gonna fuck up those freshmen real good? Jared, yeah, Pop. Jason, no mercy. Jason holds out his fist, waiting. Jared, yep, no mercy. Jason, come on, boy, like you mean it. No mercy. Jared, no mercy, Dad. Jared runs off as Jason raspberries Casey. She giggles. Casey, now put me down. Jace. Exterior, Jared's house, evening. Jared jogs into the street, going over plays in his head. Soon he arrives at the most ostentatious McMansion around and hurries around to the back. Jared secret knocks on the door. Taylor, 18, a brute, opens it. Jared, no mercy. Taylor, no mercy. Get in here, little bitch. They bro hug and then run downstairs to the basement, where Jared finds his teammates circling a dozen kneeling freshmen, blue hoods on their heads, hands tied behind their backs. Taylor, which one do you want? Jared, meanie. Taylor laughs and pushes him forward. Montage. Jared and teammates pour vodka into the initiate's mouth through their hoods, chanting, drink, drink, drink. Jared and teammates paddle the freshmen, pants around their knees as they crawl down the hallway. Jared and teammates cheer riotously as freshmen line up to have simulated sex with a blow-up doll. Jared and teammates flank the bathroom door as initiates crawl in, yank off their hoods, and vomit into the toilet. Taylor, flush or you'll lick it up. Jared, no mercy. Fist bumps all around. The doorbell rings. Interior upstairs moments later. The cheerleading team streams in, screaming and laughing with glee. The football team passes them shots, which they pound. Drunk freshmen lie strewn throughout the room, passed out. Shayla, 17, plucked and painted to perfection, kisses Jared. Shayla, hey, bae, how's the party? Jared, poppin', bae, def poppin'. They deep kiss. Later, a full-on rager. Shayla and Jared swap spit in the corner till he's distracted by shouting at the door. Jared moves through the crowd to see Taylor pushing around Martin, 17, an awkward, twitchy rodent. Jared, yo, sup, yo. Taylor, this faggot was spying on the party so we could write about it for the school paper. Jared, what the fuck, faggot? To Taylor, I got this. Jared steps forward. Martin stares back, fortifying himself. Jared pushes Martin out of the house into the backyard. Jared, the fuck, Martin? Get out of here. Martin, why should I? Jared, because no faggots on the football team. Martin, you sure about that? Jared threatens to punch Martin. Jared, get the fuck out of here. Martin sprints away as Jared watches him go. Exterior, Taylor's McMansion front door night. Jared stumbles out and onto the street, wasted. He wanders aimlessly, muttering no mercy as he stumbles through his football footwork. Exterior, Jared's house, later. Jared bypasses his own house and heads into the woods. He walks along a rough path until he gets to a secluded clearing and pond. He stares at the water. Martin off screen. You're an asshole. Jared sees Martin sitting across the pond, staring at him. Jared, me? You're the one trying to get yourself killed. Martin, and you want to kill me? Jared, don't be a dick. Martin, no mercy, no mercy. Jared, what's that mean? Martin, that's your motto, isn't it? Jared approaches Martin and sits. Jared, don't be a dumbass. Martin, I'm a dumbass? Right. Jared, yes, no, you're not, but you're acting stupid. Don't make it so hard on yourself. Martin, you mean on you? Jared tries to kiss Martin, who pushes him away. Martin, you're sending really mixed messages. Jared, you know I can't do anything. Martin, can't or won't? Jared, come on, I said I was sorry. Martin, actually, you didn't. Jared, okay, I'm sorry. They stare into each other's eyes. Jared steals a kiss. Quickly, desire overtakes them, and Martin pulls at Jared's clothes as they fall into each other's arms. Later, Jared and Martin lie on their backs, looking up at the moon, hands intertwined. Jared pulls off his championship ring and gives it to Martin. Martin, I'll never be able to wear it. Jared, I don't care, it's our secret. Martin hands it back. Martin, thanks, but no thanks. Jared, what? Why? I'll be getting another one next week anyway. Martin, you're pathetic. Are you going to refuse to be who you're supposed to be your whole life? Jared, who am I supposed to be? Martin, someone honest, true to who you are? Jared, this is who I am. I'm me. Come on. Jared pushes the ring at Martin. Jared, just don't let anyone see it, okay? Martin sighs, annoyed. He hooks it on his chain necklace. Jared rests his head on Martin's chest. They finally sleep. Dawn. The sun sneaks through the trees, warming Jared and Martin's faces with an orange glow. They slowly stir. Martin, fuck, I gotta get home. He jumps up and pulls on his clothes. Jared, when can we get together again? Martin, Monday after school. Jared, I have practice. Martin, duh, you always have practice. After that. Martin kisses him and runs off. Jared soaks in the natural beauty around him. A smile creeps across his face. Peace. Exterior, Martin's McMansion, moments later. Martin sprints inside. He tiptoes through the empty great room, dominated by a giant, gaudy teardrop chandelier and much fake marble. No one appears to be home. He unclenches and sprints upstairs to his bedroom. Martin finds his parents sitting on his bed. He freezes. His mother, Deirdre, 40s, cries softly, while his father, Cliff, 40s, fumes, both looking like frustrated extras from a Rock Hudson Doris Day movie. Cliff, where the hell were you? Martin, out, in the woods. Deirdre, all night? That's not safe. Cliff, I don't believe you. Martin, well, now I'm here, present and accounted for, sir. Cliff, enough, who are you with? Martin's brain is racing, a caged animal. Martin, no one. Cliff, the lies stop. Now, who are you with? Martin, everyone. No one. Someone. Cliff shoves him against the wall. Deirdre jumps up. Deirdre, stop, Cliff. Cliff shoves her back onto the bed. Martin, fine, school friends. I was a school friends. Cliff, who? Martin, as if you know any of them. Cliff, don't speak to me that way. Who was it? Martin, bend over and kiss off. Cliff, enough. I want to know who. Martin, then why don't you name them? Just one. Name one fucking friend. Cliff slaps him. Martin steels himself, his eyes filled with hate. Martin, you can't, because you don't fucking care. You know shit about my life. Deirdre, Martin, please don't use that language. Of course we care about you. Martin, really? All you care about is what your church friends say. Cliff, that's it. I'm done here. Deirdre throws herself at Cliff, clinging desperately. Deirdre, don't, baby, please. Martin, don't what? Cliff opens the door and walks out as Deirdre screams. Off Cliff's red, pulsing face, we hear, Martin, stop crying, mama. Ouch, ouch, stop. Who are you? Leave me alone. Let go. Deirdre, Cliff, come back here. End of scene. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Pam. That was fantastic. What a great group of readings tonight. Thank you to all of our readers, Leslie, Jacinda, Roy, Erin, Sam. I'm sorry Greg wasn't able to make it tonight. He had a power outage that kept him away, but what a powerhouse group of readings tonight. So thank you to every one of the readers. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight watching. And let's have another round of applause for all of our readers. Thank you so much. And after the reading, there's everybody. There we go. There's everybody's faces. Thank you all so much for an incredible reading tonight. So what's going to happen now, if anyone is interested in doing some socializing, we have these speakeasy social hours set up for students and faculty in Canvas. And we'd love to see you there. Otherwise, have a fantastic evening and we'll see you in the morning. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.